The pandemic is showing some signs of leveling out in the United States. Long-term impacts on the economy and business, large and small, will certainly be felt for years. Joining us right now to talk more about that is PricewaterhouseCoopers U.S. CEO Tim Ryan. Tim, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. What's your take on the state of the economy amid this pandemic? I know that we are expecting a contraction in the second quarter. How do you see things in terms of the economy right now?
Yeah, so we've been doing it every other week survey with our clients, over 300 CFOs, and what's very clear is that we are clearly in an earnings challenge season right now. We've seen over 3/4 of CFOs say their profits, liquidity, and operations are affected. So it's real. And what's even more importantly in our survey, what they're telling us is that it will take longer to snap back than they originally thought. In fact, 61% say they'll snap back in 3 months, but 39% say it'll take longer than 3 months to snap back.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to ask you about. In terms of that snapback, you say it's going to take longer. It's also going to look different, right? What kind of long-term changes do you foresee the coronavirus is going to have on business in the U.S. and worldwide? Are you hearing from some of your clients new plans to change the way they approach their business? When you look at restaurants, are we going to be sitting farther apart from each other, doors? I mean, anything that you can tell us in terms of how this changes the way we work and live longer term once we get out of this?
Thank you, Maria. What's very clear is that things will come back different. So the idea of simply going back to the way that we were is not what we're likely to see. And one of the things that our clients have shared with us is that industries that were already under pressure, when you think about things like retail banking, insurance, when you look at healthcare, higher education, they were already under pressure to change to a digital world. That change is happening on an accelerated basis. So we tend to think about restaurants, but buying experiences, how customer orders are fulfilled, how experience is delivered, they will all change going forward. If anything, this virus has accelerated the digital transformation that was already occurring in the world today.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Mattie Duppler, jump in here.
Tim, I've been watching that survey of your CFOs with great interest because you have seen quite the drop in optimism and thoughts about how we're going to recover. I am curious, the efforts coming out of Congress, like the PPP program, money to businesses to keep their workers on payroll, do you think those will be successful? And what else do policymakers have to do so that recovery doesn't take months and maybe years?
Yeah, what I would say is that we're clearly hearing among the business community, the actions that have been taken at the federal, state, and local levels have helped. And just to give you a sense, over 80% of the survey participants are taking advantage of the payroll tax deferral. 42% are taking advantage of the other tax elements, and over 30% are taking advantage of the loan program. So there's no doubt they've helped. What's too early to tell at this point, whether it's enough when you look at the significant challenges. And that goes to the previous question, because the reality is some businesses are going to be changed forever. And so what will be challenging to see is what more is needed. And is it more that's needed to keep them as was, or is it more needed to help them to get to where they need to be going forward in a digital world where it's been rapidly accelerated?
Wow. Joseph Pinion, jump in here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, one of my concerns is that, and my question to you is that, are we, having these plans on paper that kind of ignore human realities? What I mean by that is, are we ignoring the latency that might be involved in this recovery? We spoke about airlines earlier, canceling many of their flights. But the reality is that, when we talking about businesses, close to 300,000 jobs in New York alone, powered by nightlife, that's $38 billion in economic productivity that might not come back, immediately, because people might stay in their houses. They might cook. The manner in which people actually trust that we're through this is going to take a while. So are you guys talking about that? Is that some of the things you're having in your discussions at a high level?
Absolutely. The dialogue with our clients has really shifted over the last 6 weeks. I would say 6 weeks ago, there was more what I'll say locking down and bracing, the basic cost cutting, protecting liquidity. What's clearly shifted over the last couple of weeks is strategically thinking about what the new normal looks like, recognizing it won't be, and that there was a lot of what I'll say pent-up demand, more willingness to do things differently. And there's been a really big strategic shift over the last couple of weeks around what does business look like going forward? And I can almost rattle sector by sector. That discussion is happening. So it's gone from the typical or the initial bracing and how do we get ready to weather this out to very much more a very different strategic dialogue at companies, which is what do we look like on the other side of this? And it's not just employees in terms of how they come to work. That's a big piece of it. What does the workplace of the future look like as employees come to work? That's one piece of it. The second one is what does supply chain look like going forward? Because it likely will not look the same. We'll see more resiliency, more flexibility than we've ever seen before. And then lastly, the customer experience, whether that customer is a retail customer or that customer is another business buying, what we're seeing is buying patterns will change. And so that latency and that willingness to do things differently is very significant. And it's causing companies to rethink supply chain, the way they do work, and buying patterns going forward. There's a big strategic shift happening in front of our eyes.
It sure is. And we want to continue talking about that strategic shift. Tim, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We will keep on this subject. Our viewers want to better understand how we're going to look on the other side. So please come back soon. Tim Ryan, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
CEO at PwC.